Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, everyone. Hope you had a good weekend. Outside, I assume, with fancy football for most. Yes, it was quite a stinker FPL wise, with missed penalties and goalkeepers being tackled to wipe out clean sheets, amongst other things, bringing mass despair. Well, there were some bright spots for some of us. Anyway, we're back on Monday rather than Wednesday, as previously advertised. That's due to work commitments midweek for Sam. But to be honest, I'm not sure we're missing out too much in terms of the blank game weeks looming. So lots to talk about there. Cue massive injury, hey, something like that. As mentioned, I'm joined by Sam, as usual, who probably picked a great weekend to be mostly offline exploring Edinburgh. All good, mate? Good trip?
Yeah, good trip. Got back on the plane this morning, so busy day, but just about had time to sort of settle my thoughts, really assess what went down over the weekend, watch the match of the day, all of that jazz. So yeah, good weekend away. Quite nice to be able to take my mind off of FPL for a bit whilst things were going seemingly not too great, and then all of a sudden went okay again. So yeah, absolutely fine. Palmer with the assist already so far today has cheered me up again. In the meantime,
Good.
though, we are who got the assist. On today's pod, we'll get straight into it this week. Blank game week, of course, will be the main focus. A reminder of our approach tied in with the scores on the doors, why we went the way we did, because neither of us are on a free hit for game week 29. So it'll be explaining that. Linking in with that, we'll be jointly putting together our favoured free hit team for this week. And as non-free hitters, we'll be assessing how worried we are about the individual picks we might not have. Ask who is nailed on, of course, as well, and what are some of the left field alternatives. So some differentials that we might be able to stake a claim for. Obviously, on that note as well, bold claims will be coming back out. Captaincy discussion, of course, and for us non-free hitters, some transfer chat as well. In the meantime, though, it is the 11th of March. It's half time during the Chelsea-Newcastle game. As I mentioned, Palmer has got the assist so far, and Isak got the equaliser. And I'm sure if you hear some sort of shout in the background in the second half, that's because Palmer's put one in. So, yeah, fingers crossed. But yeah, shall we move on to scores on the doors for now?
Yeah, let's do it then. And as you said, we're going to quickly kind of arc into our strategy after that as well. So yeah, this week for me, I'm doing right. Obviously, Palmer on the bench is not great. Basically, I benched him for Foden in the end. Highly painful, but the reasoning was I was watching the game on Sunday, just because baby and my other half were both out, and didn't realise we'd be podding tonight, or stupidly that might have played a role. It was truly a coin flip between the two of them, really, as you can show with the EO. Liverpool turned over by Arsenal, and on paper the team wasn't particularly strong. So kind of I was hoping for something. I mean, the closest I got was Kelleher punching the ball onto Foden's head, which then hit the woodwork, which would have been very fortuitous indeed. But hey, there we go. Sold Gordon for Bowen. Very fortunate with the injury for Gordon. So that's come out positively. And then sold Haaland for Morris, which last time we spoke, as in publicly, I was kind of resistant to, and more of which anon. Basically, the story of this week is two men, Son Heung-min, shockingly low EO. I didn't even realise how low it was, Sam, until you mentioned it to me. It's a 42.5% at kind of the 200k mark. That's really, really good to get the 17 points there, like real kind of proper safety sort of territory. And then Benjamin William White, 11 points, free bonus, continuing to repay me for all the pain that he has caused me. Yes, from Benjamin Dick White to Benjamin William White, or maybe Sir Benjamin William White. Maybe I will end up keeping it all season. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, a smallish screen arrow at the moment, kind of 50k, something like that. We'll see what happens with Palmer over the second half of the game. Obviously, could have been better if I'd have swapped him and Foden over, but it was a bit of a coin flip in the end. And yes, we've got Morris, Doughty, and Solanke captain still to go. So yeah, in a good position for I guess like a smallish screen arrow this week, pending Morris doing something. I mean, in the game, Sam, is a Doughty Doughty to Morris sort of moment, and that Morris hit it straight at the goalkeeper annoyingly. But hey, what could have been? And yeah, just hope we get lucky basically in the second half, because you also have followed suit, haven't you? Except you've taken a slightly bigger hit than me.
Yeah, so I feel like you followed my suit since I was the one who suggested it. But anyway,
Yeah. A suit was followed somewhere. We both get over it.
But what you can say for the first time this season, I believe, is you're ahead of me by a couple of points. And Benjamin William White, as you aforementioned, is the reason that you have overtaken me this week. So congratulations through gritted teeth there. And he is actually now the top point scoring defender in FPL this season, which is just absolutely crazy. I can't believe it. So yeah, 11 points from him is the difference maker there. I did take the -8, as you mentioned. So I got rid of 2 of the City, left Foden on the bench, and also brought in Bowen as well in midfield for Garnacho, which, to be honest, I understand why people would sort of laugh at that. I was never starting Garnacho over Foden anyway. So he would have just been stuck on my bench. So I don't really hold too many grudges there. I went with Bowen over Foden, thinking over the next 2 weeks he would pay for the 4-point hit. Obviously, none of the 4-point hits have paid off yet, but I still have games in hand to play, and the City assets are now done. So I'd like to think that I should be able to make that up and make that strategy worthwhile. The second reason that I think most people can probably see that I did that is to avoid the free hit in game week 29. It takes me to 8 players active and covers a lot of the bases I wanted to cover if I was free hitting in game week 29 anyway, which we'll come on to later. I was very on the fence, even podding last week and up until Saturday morning, I believe, well, Friday night even, at the very least, on which strategy I would take. And I just had a bit of a gut feeling that the way I wanted to play it this year was really attack the last 9 game weeks. And I wanted to keep the free hit back to use it in an aggressive manner. That's not to say it's the best way of playing, because I've had success playing it aggressively and defensively. And it will almost certainly mean a green arrow for anyone playing it in game week 29. I just have an inkling that I'm going to want it more in game week 34 at the moment. So fingers crossed that pays off. We don't know yet. It could go either way. And there's obviously a split vote in the community at the moment. But we're the ones flying the flag for the non-free hit group at the moment. And fingers crossed it pays off. It would have been a very big red arrow for me if it wasn't for Son. So thank you very much for that haul, Son. That was very much appreciated. And yeah, we've still got the second game to go for Luton and Bournemouth. And the good news is that they're both playing pretty rubbish sides. So you would expect some goals there or something.
Yes.
So yeah, fingers crossed. I think it's okay. Considering I took the -8, I'm only down 20k. I actually call that a complete success for now. So yeah, we'll see how it comes out after game week 29 is done and dusted, because that's when I'll really know how big the damage was. But I think it's going okay.
Yeah. On Son, I think that we forgot the narrative that Sons always deliver on Mother's Day.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
I was pretty proud of that. Didn't get anywhere on X because my account is not massive, but there we go. And yes, when I think a lot of kind of this week's optimism, despite it being quite a poor week, was the sense of relief when Haaland blanked. And I'm very sorry if you do own Haaland. I said this to you on Sunday, Sam, and I was so proud of your analogy that I think it's worth repeating. I had a beer or two, but I'm proud of my boost eloquence here. But I said to you, it feels like, imagine you really, really need a wee, but someone stops you and you know it's not going to be a short chat. So say it's at work, you've had too many coffees, and you think, oh my God, I really need to go. Tom, can you come and have a look at this, please? Oh no. Yeah, of course. And you sat there for a bit and you're like, yeah, absolutely. And then you get through that, finally gets the urinal, and that level of relief with the release, that was how it felt when Haaland blanked. I'm really sorry if you're in Haaland, but obviously someone who sold for Morris as such a kind of put that on my tombstone. This is a move that I made in FPL once, proper achievement unlock. It definitely kind of felt like a big bullet dodge. And we'll have to kind of see. Keith has just asked in the chat, will we both wildcard in 30 to 31? We'll talk about it in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously getting him back is a big consideration. And one of the only considerations, considering we both mentioned getting Salah in 30, that's only going to be able to be solved by wielding that wildcard. Shall we skip straight to the week ahead, as very little to say, which isn't a hot topic focus this week? There are 5 things to discuss here, so we have kind of slightly enlarged this section. First thing, chip strategy, where have we landed? Won't go on for it too long, just because I know that those people are on free hit 29 if you're listening, but we'll kind of give our side where we are, why we're there. Hopefully you're interested in what our reasoning is, but we're not here to kind of be, I guess, I don't know. We're here to be balanced about both sides of it. Completely understand why you would free hit 29, why you wouldn't, etc., etc. Throw in some bold claims, of course. Look at the best free hit team, and also for us as non-free hitters, talk about who we're most worried about. Where are the opportunities, and where are there players that are potentially going to hurt us as non-free hitters. Best transfers in, of course, non-free hitters, a bit of a shorter one there, and best captain as well, which again, I suppose would be quite a short one to round the pod off with. Cool. So strategic direction, decision, selling Haaland for Morris. I did a complete 180, mainly due to Sam's great powers of persuasion. In fact, I went there before you did. I kind of sold Haaland a little bit earlier this week, just because Morris was going to rise, and I was hoping I'd get 0.2 out of him, etc., etc. But the general strategy we decided on in the end was we were both going to eventually go for that, avoiding that free hit 29 in favour of maybe a free hit 34, maybe a 37, but likely to be a 34 free hit. Apologies for not updating last pods where we were going to end up. Sam, you said you were kind of thinking about it up until the last minute, which is kind of fair enough. And it's the usual health warnings, I suppose, about podding early in the week, as thoughts are earlier. But yeah, I mean, we're unwittingly, perhaps, I mean, we talk a lot, obviously, offline too. We're not just on this once a week, and that's all we speak about. We speak about FPL an awful lot, probably on a healthy amount, to be fair, because a lot of time I'm reading your mind and vice versa. But yeah, in terms of our strategy, which sounds absolutely horrendous to say, would you mind giving a quick sort of overview, really, of where we've landed?
So in terms of where we've landed in particular, I've put on the screen the chip strategy for the doubles and the blanks. We'll kind of skim over that because I think it's just to sort of have that in the background as a reference point from this point onwards. The way we've gone, and I'll do it from my point of view first, because you've gone the same way but without the extra hits. So my strategy in particular was to attack double game week 28 a little bit more than I was able to otherwise. So obviously one route to take would have been free hitting in game week 29 for the big blank, and then probably holding off on the wild card for a bit longer, most likely to dead end in game week 34, and then wild card out of that to set up for the big double game week in game week 37. Now, that is obviously a very, very solid strategy. I think a lot of people will go that way. The one thing that I had maybe some hesitance over that strategy on was the fact that, number one, we don't know exactly what those doubles are looking like at the moment. They might not quite fall the way we want them to, and my team just might not happen to be that well set up for dead ending into game week 34. And again, I feel like any hits that I didn't take now and free hitting in game week 29 would have almost certainly had to be taken later on down the line to either set up for 34 or 37, depending which one I wanted to bench boost in, for example. The other thing I wanted to consider as part of our strategy, our route, was number one, getting back to Salah as soon as possible in game week 30 or 31. I think that would be a big point of our strategy that hopefully will have as an advantage. And then the other thing was, which team did I want to attack more in double game week 28? Was it Luton? Was it Bournemouth? Now, I think naturally it would have been Bournemouth, but I already had Solanke, and none of the midfielders I was too bothered by. None of them were really doing it for me. Obviously, two of them could still do really well in the second game, but
Yep.
I didn't really feel it. And then it got down to the defense. And other than Neto in goal, I just wasn't really feeling any of the defenders. So I thought Morris on penalties, Doughty also good attacking upside. Okay, maybe not too high a chance of a clean sheet, but 3 games in just 2 game weeks compared to 1 for a lot of other players seemed like a pretty decent way to do it. So I saw both the upside and covering off game week 29 as well as the benefit, and it means that I can just attack with as few hits as possible, with as many chips as possible from game week 30 onwards, and obviously also get back to Salah and probably a team that I'm very comfortable with in game week 30, knowing that outside of game week 34, most of the best players are players that I want in my side come game week 30 all the way through to the end of the season, because it's very likely game week 37 is going to be full of good teams doubling. So it means that I've got a longer stretch with a better side that I'm more happy to carry in the single game weeks as well. That was my logic on it. Obviously, I took a -8 to get there. So that was the deal with the devil I've created for myself. But I still think that if I can come out of game week 29 with not too much damage and only 1 player down on the free hit 11 now as well, then hopefully it will set me up nicely for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's kind of about right. And it's worth noting that, one, we've been building towards this for a long time. Like, we flagged this eventuality, I think, kind of back in game week 23, something like that.
Yeah,
that this
around
was
then.
a potential way to go. And it's certainly been something that we've both been factoring into our transfers for an awful long time. If you've been listening as well, for that kind of period of time too, you'll know, for example, in game week 24, I got Doughty in, thinking, yeah, okay, he's got that 20, he's almost definitely got that 29, worth buying in now, and kind of making moves recently along that sort of thought process. So buying Slanky for this week, knowing that he can then go up for Tony, potentially, or Wissa, as Kieran's mentioned in the chat, buying in Son for Huang, and things like that. And the other thing, I think, which is probably a bit of almost a saving grace, a quirk of the calendar, which has kind of gone, it's not kind of meant that free hitting in 29 is inevitable, or not free hitting 29, sorry, is inevitable. But Arsenal versus City, in game week 30, alongside City playing Liverpool, obviously this weekend just gone, really was a bit of a boon, really, because selling the likes of Haaland last week, and spoiler alert, I'm looking at selling Saka to Maddison both of those sort of games are games that, yeah, okay, I mean, it's fine to be fielding players in them. I fielded Foden this week, and I mean, I've got hindsight, kind of hindsight infused regret all over not playing Palmer now, but that's just hindsight. Like, I was always going to play Foden, and it's the same with selling Saka, that I'm not going to be too upset about not having him in game week 30, and especially because in his place, effectively, is going to be Maddison versus Luton at home. So both of those factors, the quirk of the calendar, has meant that at the moment you can, yes, you'll be a couple of men down, but you can, I guess, build a fairly decent case to go this way. However, this has already kind of happened now. All of these sort of, all the wheels are in motion. I don't think there's going to be anybody who's going to be on the borderline between the two. And I think if you've got kind of seven players right now, and you're kind of thinking, oh, do I take -4 or do I free hit? You're probably going to be in a very, very, very small minority. Most people have kind of gone one way or the other. I think a lot of people who are free hitting dead set have got like 2 players. That's basically it, or something like that. And for me, yeah, it is that free hit 34 or free hit 37 potentially being the one. I think free hit 37, although it does look like a good week to free hit on the projections, the reality of it is that it's very likely to be a bit of a red arrow if you do free hit that week, for what we know now, just because everybody else is probably going to be bench boosting that week, like regardless of whether you're free hit or not, non-free hitting this week, unless you bench boosted kind of outside off piste, most people will be bench boosting in 37, so you'll have 22 players, maybe even kind of 20, because you may want to have 1 or 2 kind of single game weekers. Using the free hit that week doesn't feel as effective, whereas in 34 it might be, especially if you can buy, in our case, avoid buying new Newcastle United players on the wild card, which we're going to have to play a little bit earlier than if you free hit this week. But maybe we can kind of structure our team slightly differently. And as you said, Sam, enjoy kind of having a bit of an Uber team for a little while without having to pay too much consideration with, oh, there's a double coming up, I need to kind of buy this player. And we've got a bit of a grace period, I guess, with transfers in. I guess it's kind of a parallel, I suppose. If you were always going to be free hitting now, you've had a little bit of a grace period recently to just kind of be like, well, maybe apart from Son, the grace period's just buy in players squarely focused on the weeks ahead. So buying a Slanky this week, buying the Bournemouth defenders, which is absolutely fair gambit, to be honest. I mean, I don't think anybody had what was it, goal, Sam? I don't think anybody had.
I'll keep track.
It's 2-1. I don't think anybody had Bournemouth conceding 2 Sheffield United on the chalk. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty happy with that. Cole Palmer scored.
Come on. Let's go. That could be close to a green arrow for me now.
Huge red. Never mind.
Wow. I don't even know where to start now with that. That was really well summed up. I think, look, there's merits to both strategies. I don't want to sit here and become one of those podcasts who's saying, oh, we've done it the right way or they've done it the wrong way, because I think it, like you say, it's completely dependent how your team was set up as soon as we started seeing the doubles and the blanks getting confirmed. If you had 3 or 4 players playing for game week 29, then obviously you're going to take a different route to those who had 7 or 8 players ready to play in game week 29, because it just makes sense to follow that pathway. Sometimes these things are mapped out for us, and the optimal way of playing is actually optimal to your team, not necessarily anyone else's. It just so happened, I think, in our situation that we were kind of put right in the middle of things, where we had, I think, 4 or 5 when it started to get announced and it all started to come to fruition. And we, for a couple of weeks, were kind of on the fence as to which way it could go. And it still could be a case that you never know. There are midweek European fixtures involving some of the game week 29 sides. Injuries could still happen. It could still ruin our plans completely. So I'm still just crossing my fingers and hoping that I survive this week up until game week 29 and just the damage isn't too great by the time we get out of it. But again, those who free hit in game week 29 have probably had weeks and weeks and weeks planning up to this, optimize their side around the free hit, and outside of the free hit in game week 30 and beyond, they're probably looking pretty well set up anyway. So there's no one quick fix for FPL. There's loads of different strategies that could work. And it just so happens, I think ours is maybe slightly less popular than the norm this year. I think most people are on free hit this week in game week 29, or at least that's where it seems.
Yeah, and I think we're quietly confident. I think if you're free hitting, you're probably also, well, with good reason, confident you're probably going to get a green arrow, almost definitely.
Yeah.
Really, really screw the pooch. So I think that there's definitely pluses and minuses either side, and it's just a case of whatever suited your team way back when, almost. But hey, there we go. A couple of kind of other questions here then, Sam. When are we looking to wildcard? Has been asked. I think that the real sort of need for wildcarding, probably because I'm going to be looking to sell Saka this week. I haven't got much money in Saka, and I've got him at 9, so I haven't got that kind of cash invest in him like other people do, so I'm fine to do that. But come game week 31, when we play Luton at home, I'm definitely going to want Saka back in my team. So that's a hard stop, really, for buying him. Game week 30, Man City and Arsenal play each other. And I don't know whether I will be wildcarding then. Yes, I know it's international break coming up. I also know that game week 31 is midweek, so it's probably not actually the best time to be wildcarding in terms of a temporal sort of lens. But nonetheless, I think that'll be the time that I do it. Game week 31. And in some ways, I quite like that, pulling it on Saturday, only really having till Tuesday to play with it. I don't have the time to overthink, go down all of these sort of strange little avenues, the rabbit holes that you always sort of seem to venture down and free hit. Albeit, I don't know, I think that kind of I do tend to have everything sort of almost worked out fairly quickly without having loads and loads of need for discussion on these things. Of course, we will discuss it in depth, but I tend to be quite good at that. So I think I'll content myself with kind of having that weekend while the games are going on, Game Week 30 after international break. But I think the team's good enough. And also, Game Week 30, we're both going to come out of it with triple Spurs against Luton, and discussion for probably when we are on wildcard. I don't know really how many of them are going to last the distance, although there is that rogue double that could go in at any point. But I think having triple Spurs is not going to happen. Maybe double, maybe Porro will hold on, or I'll have to do Doggy or something like that. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep Son because of just price, basically, effectively. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I am with that when I'll eventually kind of wildcard. And I suppose the same for you, but you're not as sure.
Yeah, I'm not as sure. I think it for me, my team doesn't look quite as well set up in Game Week 30 as yours might do. I might have to carry one or two Arsenal players in the starting 11. I think if I own Saka that week, which I'm looking like I will, I would want to start him, even if it is against Man City. Same goes with Haaland. Obviously, I've sold him. It's not an ideal week for him against the best defense statistically in the league, but I feel like I've already tried to chance my arm a little bit too much in Game Week 28 and get away without him. Once was enough. I don't know if I could do it a second time and live to tell the tale. So I'm a little bit scared of that. If I feel a bit braver when I look at my Game Week 30 side and I'm happy enough without him, because I won't be captaining him. I'll definitely be captaining either Son or Salah. I can get to Salah without a hit. But then I'm just a little bit worried about not having Haaland for that week. Probably not the scariest week to go without him. But then also starting an Arsenal defender, starting Doughty as well. It's not the ideal setup for Game Week 30, but it's definitely not necessary to wildcard that week. I just always had it in my mind that it's a nice long international break.
Yeah.
Do some planning, really, really think it all through. And it suits the way I like to play the game. So I'll really have to think about it when I get to Game Week 30, whether or not I want to activate. Because if I do, I want to do it straight away. I won't want to leave it a week and a half and then, okay, go on, I'll wildcard. I want to do it and enjoy the 2 weeks of planning and really thinking it all through. But you're right. Only having a couple of days between Game Week 30 and 31 might not be a bad thing. And also, we do often see the first game after the international break or the first round of fixtures after the international break being a little bit weird, a little bit of a damp squib, not really kicking off the way that we expect it to, and it takes another week to get going. Maybe that will occur again. So yeah, I could go either 30 or 31. I definitely won't be leaving it after that though.
Mm-hmm. Well, that seems to be it. And then if you're free hitting now, I suppose that the option that we both kind of already touched on it, the option is there for you to keep going. So I don't know, when we had the FA Cup reaction, I was really excited by the fact that you've got these kind of different avenues which are open to people. I think that's kind of great because there's opportunity in that. Because if you're free hitting now, you can go through to, I guess maybe because you haven't got free hit for Game Week 34 like we do, you can go through to 34, dead into 34, wildcard into 35, and kind of have a very kind of shorter window between 35 and 37. Set up your bench boost. That I'm almost definitely sure is going to be where a lot of people go, especially if you're kind of led by some of the larger content creators. Not that you're kind of blindly following somebody, but that's kind of, I suspect, what we'll see a lot more of out there. And I think that's really exciting, basically, because I believe in this plan, but it is all vibes, it's belief in what you think is the best way, the assessment on the kind of the situation. Some of it is also kind of influenced perhaps by OR as well, like where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
But I mean that's kind of part and parcel of this part of the season, and I think it's really interesting. Would advise just stay off FPL Twitter or whatever if you're not feeling pugnacious, because it's definitely going to be kind of deep divisions, which always do tend to descend into
doesn't sound like FPL
nonsense. Yes. Although today was especially interesting. Anyway, right, let's move on to bold claims, shall we? Just before we get onto the free hit team, let's get out of the way. So last week you said 5 goals in Villa versus Spurs. Didn't
So
quite
close.
happen. And
So
I
close.
said Solanke to score under 10 points in progress on target. So
It could have been over already. It could have already been 10 points plus easily. And yeah, he
yeah,
fluffed it.
exactly. I was
Small
fell
margin.
over, didn't he? Poor guy. And this week, Sam, week ahead, what have you got?
On that, before we get there, do you think that he cares at all whether or not people captain him in a double game week in FPL?
No,
I've just got to get your take on this.
I'm sure he doesn't give a toss.
Okay.
If he's a professional footballer, no, I don't think so.
No, I was just listening to Above Average on the way back from Edinburgh earlier, and they did make me chuckle because what I think he used an example of a guy who said he's lost his house betting on Solanke scoring, and he obviously that matters way more than a fantasy football game. So I'd imagine if any striker has to bear that kind of responsibility on people making bets on a weekly basis, then I'm sure FPL doesn't really come into their thinking. But maybe he gets a little bit of stick in the dressing room or something. Oh, I triple captained you this week. Why'd you sky that? Maybe. But
maybe. What can they do though? I mean, it's not as if like they're the one who's expressly placed in the bet. You know, it's all about the
exactly.
Exactly. And in that case, I'd suggest the individual seeks help imminently, because that is not a good situation to be.
Yes, I think the house thing was a joke, by the way. I don't think it was being serious, but it was just I
gathered that. But yes,
yeah,
you know what I mean. All right. So this week, Sam, you have we've contrasted, haven't we?
We've gone directly opposed, which is rare for us. We don't usually do it so closely related. But with only 8 clean sheets potentially on the cards as a maximum, I've gone the other way. I'm going with no clean sheets whatsoever in game week 29, all teams to concede, clean sheet wipeouts across the board, and defenders to just be disappointing once again.
I've gone for a defender being the high scorer this week. Actually,
complete opposite.
I just you can just imagine the cat kicker or something. Just rising
double header
score. It's one of those. It's just completely random. I think it's going to pass the Forest test in terms of being improbable enough. I think. You can just imagine it, can't you? I think with this, it's completely vibes, of course. I mean, if I was sat here and gone, Willy Bolly to be high scorer, I think that's probably getting a bit silly. But I think
that's too bold.
Hope it's Doughty. I just hope it's Doughty. Finally, all of those X crosses come home to roost. Every single one of them goes onto Carlton Morris's head. A hat trick of headers from a hat trick of Doughty crosses. That would be absolutely bloody lovely.
That would be just so sweet. It's so sweet. Anyway, right, moving on before we get carried away with ourselves. Onto the free hits section for game week 29. Obviously, neither of us are doing it, but that doesn't prevent us from trying to build something that looks pretty good. And we both very quickly. I think it took about 20 seconds from you messaging me saying, "Oh, could you send me what you would pick for your favorite free hit team?" I sent this back immediately. You started laughing and literally pinged me back the exact same team, minus the bench. I think the bench was slightly different.
Yeah, but the bench is like so whatever, isn't it? Like, no,
do you want to run through the starting 11 for anyone listening? I think most people, if you pause the podcast right now and scribble down 11, I reckon you could probably get at least 10. I reckon you probably get 11.
Right. Should we do got need as well? For our intended teams, which I think is probably going to be quite good. So in goal, it is Mr. Flecken, Burnley away. That's a need for both of us, but I think that he probably is where you go. That'll probably be the most stupidly, maybe the most contentious pick of the lot is him or midfielder 4. And this is a 3-4-3, which I think are probably going to be the more contentious ones. It's whether you go for a potential clean sheet, and you may be thinking that Burnley Brentford is the most potential clean sheet somewhere, maybe. Burnley, Burnley's second from bottom for Team XG this year, so maybe we're looking at that. You might want to go for maybe we've got Leno, and I'm quite comfortable with that because he's going to face a bag load of shots. So you may be looking for saves. But I mean, yeah. So I think it's probably going to be Flecken, I suppose. Doughty got
Got
for you.
yeah,
Pedro Porro got
got
for you. I think both of
happy.
them self-explanatory. Doughty, the main creative force for Luton,
Mm.
unless it's kind of 90+ minutes, in which case Andros Townsend's the man throwing in those crosses from deep, and Corley Woodrow of all people scoring his second Premier League goal, both against Crystal Palace, like I think it's like kind of 12 years apart, something ridiculous. And Pedro Porro, I think, probably is the Spurs defender of choice, or almost definitely. And then Reguilon is the third defender in the 3-4-3. I think that you've definitely been quite impressed by him, haven't you, recently?
Yeah, he's getting into some really advanced areas. He does seem to be the way that Brentford have always set up was always heavily reliant on that left fullback, that left wing back role. And obviously without Rico Henry, I think they've been really worse for wear this season. They've not really been able to attack in at least one of the routes they prefer doing so. Reguilon actually suits that role really, really well. So it's no surprise that he's come into the side and then all of a sudden they've actually started creating a lot more chances that way. And also he's coming in at the back post from the attacks from the right-hand side as well. So he's actually getting into some really advanced areas, good chance creation statistics. And obviously he's playing in a team that has a decent enough chance of a clean sheet in game week 29. I think if there was a defender I'd want and not be able to get to this week, or at least not prioritizing a transfer for this week, it would be him.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that as long as he's fit, of course.
Of course, yeah, that's a big asterisk at this point.
Tommy Frank said that he would be available for Burnley after the game. So yeah, we'll go there. At midfield, there's three of them who are, I think, fairly obvious. Son got. I'm guessing he's got the armband as well. We'll come on to armband later. Maddison, we will both have, I think.
I think so.
I think he's coming in for me tonight, actually, because it's likely that he and Saka are going to do a switcheroo. I think last time I looked anyway, I don't know if that's still the case. And Bowen, I think, is the West Ham kind of talisman go-to, got the ceiling. Do like Kudus, but I mean, we've both got Bowen at the moment, and I think that he will be in most people's sides just cause. Yeah. Midfield of four, there's definitely going to be probably some shift in where people go with that. That's definitely kind of an area of differentiation. We've both gone for Bailey here. Both need, obviously. And interesting, I think, player underlying data has been there, Sam, hasn't it, really, for Bailey?
Yeah, his underlying data is absolutely fantastic. And it always has been as well for Villa. The problem with him has always been minutes. Again, got taken off early against Spurs. So we know that is still a risk. But out of him and Douglas Luiz, obviously Douglas Luiz will get 90 minutes almost certainly. He's on penalties, but his data away from home is not great. I don't think he scored an away goal so far in the Premier League this season. All of them have come at home. I haven't double checked that recently, but I'm pretty sure I heard that from a reliable source, so I think it's correct. Bailey, on the other hand, obviously great underlying data. Playing the best he's ever played in a Villa shirt. It's just whether or not you're comfortable with an XGI per 60 or per 70 rather than the 90 that we actually see with all the data points. I think it's still good enough. Like, I think it's still fine. But he is probably that player in midfield that I feel like if you wanted to go different, if you wanted to try something a little bit crazy, then he's the weak spot I would probably go to attack against. And on the bench, we've got Gibbs White here. I think you could make a fairly strong argument to start a Nottingham Forest midfielder like him, or possibly even Elanga over Bailey if you thought Bailey was going to get subbed off early again. And again, we'll see Villa play midweek in Europe, so we might get some more information on that. If Bailey plays 90 minutes in midweek, then it probably, or maybe even 120 minutes as well, then maybe Bailey becomes less active. That's another goal, isn't it?
It's 3-1. I think he scored. I don't know. He might have scored again, Sam.
I'll check. Carry on.
I was going to say quiz time. What's that? Mudryk. There you go. Man you wanted. It might be an assist. You never know. I'm sure it will be. Quiz time, Sam. So you said that Bailey's got great underlying stats. This season, I'm sure if you've got this in your notes, it's going to be the worst quiz ever.
I don't. I guarantee you I don't.
What's his non-pen XGI for the season? Where's he ranked?
Do you mean per 90?
No, in total. That's question 2. Stop going. Stop screaming ahead.
So
where is Bailey
non-penalty
this season?
XGI out of all Premier League players or just midfielders?
All Premier League players.
He's got to be quite high. I'm going to go 12th.
Very close. So he's 15th. Just ahead of Anthony Elanga, who is worth a discussion, isn't he? Just below Anthony Gordon. Let's take that to per 90 though, Sam. And where is he?
So I think he's running at about 0.6 XGI per 90, maybe slightly higher than that. Although I haven't tracked it in the last couple of weeks, so it might have fallen a little bit. I think before that it was like 0.68, so I think it's fallen a little bit. I'm going to put him down at maybe I'll go 12th again on in terms of all players.
No, he's 5th.
Wow.
This is according to FBref.
Okay.
So he is level with Ollie Watkins, just about better than the likes of Saka, Son, Jota, etc., etc. So yeah, very, very well on that metric. And if we were able to cut it for non-pen XGI per 60, I suppose it would be even better and be a 0.73. So just kind of showing, I suppose, that the underlying data that we've spoken about a few times is actually there. And then up front, in the going back to the team, we're likely to have this front three. I think it is kind of the template front three. It is Carlton Morris, it is Ivan Toney, and it is Ollie Watkins. Ollie, Josh on Always Cheating. I was listening to them when I was doing shopping earlier on. But Josh mentioned actually, which I thought quite interesting. Last 3 away games, he scored double-digit hauls, Sam. Last 3 away games.
Interesting.
Luton, Fulham, and Sheffield United, admittedly, were who he was playing. But you have to go back to game 21 when he was away at Everton for his last blank. And maybe there's a suggestion that he would be suited to an away game, given how they might play. But I suppose West Ham are the counter-attacking specialists, and maybe they are going to be content for Villa to have the ball. So I think you probably already kind of intuited. I think most of that team is probably guessable, but you probably intuited there that both of us are likely to have 9 of these players, or 8 of these players actually. We'll both have Doughty, Porro, so they're both almost definitely going to be in your free hit team. We'll both have those. This isn't us being triumphalist dickheads, by the way. It's just kind of how we've planned it, and we have been signposting this for a long time, so it shouldn't be a surprise. We'll both have Bowen, Maddison, and Son, and we'll both have Morris, Toney, and Watkins. So it's kind of that midfielder free slot, that defender free slot. Let's not bother with goalkeeper because that's just how it is, or some variation within. Kieran in the chat earlier on said that Wisser, for example, he of free overhead kicks fame could be a pick potentially. And I'm definitely open to that.
He's also mentioned for the midfielders, which I quite like the look of as well. Iwobi in particular, I think has been decent recently, and they are open Spurs, so yeah, not bad.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of leeway there. I think for me, there's no that I'm doing Maddison and doing kind of a striker who's very kind of 90% likely to be Toney, so I haven't got the levity to get another player in. So I suppose from that perspective, if we're thinking about that kind of the worriedness index, the main worries are about that sort of wild card extra midfielder. And should we even be worried about that kind of extra defender as well? So, I mean, what's your take on the players that you're worried about for free hit 29ers? So if you are free hitting 29, this is your chance to feel schadenfreude at us being very scared of what you've got.
Well, I don't know what I've got to be worried about. I've got Charlie Taylor, mate, so I'm absolutely loving it at the back. So yeah, I mean that is obviously a weak point. So I think the big difference is I'll be taking a hit to get to 10, so -4. So that's -4. I'm going to count that basically as the equivalent of a player almost to get to 10. So I'm missing out on the fourth midfielder, which, as we've explained, there is upside there. Not all of them will go off, but one or two of them probably will. So Douglas Luiz, Bailey, one of the Nottingham Forest players, Fulham as well, maybe someone like Brennan Johnson, you never know. There's loads of different players there. Not all of them will do well, but if you get the right one, then you could be onto a stormer. We won't be able to take that chance, I don't think. So that's one disadvantage. The second disadvantage is if there are any injuries between now and game week 29, because free hitters, that just doesn't matter. You just obviously replace with another player you like the upside of, absolutely fine. It might make the overall average score a bit lower because it's going to be a good player that isn't playing anymore. But you have been able to replace that player with maybe someone that just missed out on your free hit. Otherwise, we won't get that luxury. So that's another risk. And then obviously in defense, you might have like a Reguilon or a Roslev if Reguilon's not fit. I'm going with Charlie Taylor, and I think you're going with no one, just not for that extra hit, right? So there is obvious gains to be made, but I think that the gains against our particular teams at this point, considering the hits are already in the past for me now, I think they're marginal enough that I'm comfortable that I might be able to make those losses back up in game week 34 when I do use the free hit, for instance. Obviously, there's no guarantee in that. That could go completely wrong, but it's the strategy I'm taking, and I'm crossing my fingers and my toes and hoping it pays off.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting time for that, because I don't know, for us, Dreamland is holding rank, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
that's Dreamland, and
Yeah,
that is
I'd be absolutely fine with that.
possibly it's probably a good thing that it's all over quickly, really, because it's quite a depressing thing to be going into a game week thinking of. Although, admittedly, this week to some extent, with if you're taking a -8, some weeks like you had this week, you are kind of going into it with the same aim in mind. But I mean, I think there's something about the idea that if you are free hitting, there's definitely opportunities for differentiation. It would probably be in that slot. I do think that there's maybe an argument for going with Kudus over Bowen. I know Dan FPL Fella's been saying for a long time that he feels like there's definitely something brewing with Kudus, and there's definitely with Bowen as well a slight, I don't know what it is, a slight sort of suspicion with him that maybe there's, because he's been playing that kind of number 9 role. Okay, his non-pen XGI this year, I think he's still 12th overall, so that's pretty decent. But in that number 9 role, it's only been when things have particularly been kind of amenable to how he plays and kind of the approach that he plays, for example, in the Brentford game. Like, if you look at his returns, and this is admittedly incredibly basic way of looking at it, but if you look at his actual returns, like outside the Brentford game and the kind of the last gasp assist last week, I mean, there was a kind of a procession of blanks from game week 25 all the way back to game week 20. He's been much less consistent this year than he has been in the past. Still West Ham's talisman, still got that sort of element of the fact that he probably has the ceiling there to make him worthy of a free hit inclusion. The only kind of thing I would perhaps be kind of wondering about is if you could differentiate with a Kudus or something on a 1 week basis and kind of go for it a little bit on that, because I think a lot of people will go there. I think his EO will kind of be pretty high. But West Ham playing on the counter attack, you just never know, do you? I suppose with a player like that. And as you mentioned, Morgan Gibbs White, Elanga, we've kind of nominated Bailey. Louise obviously has the penalties. Bowen doesn't have the penalties as well, so that might be another reason why you might want to go with someone else. Maybe I don't know if you can make a case for Paqueta, really. And yes, Anthony Elanga, as I mentioned earlier on, is actually doing really well in the underlying data, and Luton's defence is hardly Fort Knox, is it? So there's definitely a few kind of opportunities to differentiate within your free hit, and even down to kind of just going against a Tony with someone like Wissa. I mean, absolutely fine if you're free hitting because it's a one and done. Like, you don't have to own the guy for very long, just for 1 week. It's just that how the probabilities are going to go and how kind of spicy you're feeling, I suppose, with players like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does open you up to the potential of having a free hit that doesn't actually give you a green arrow. But obviously, if you actually do fundamentally think Wissa outscores Tony, then you go for it. But the problem is, it depends how you want to play the free hit, right? So I've even seen an argument to say, oh, we'll have Areola even on a free hit because he'll be the highest owned non-free hit keeper, so you're covering off the ownership. I think that's a slight bit too defensive considering the fixture he's got in game week 29, but you're kind of applying that logic to some of the other picks here sometimes. So Porro, you could easily say a doggy has looked more attacking recently. He's been coming inside that left channel and actually been in more advanced areas than Porro has in game week 28, for instance. So you might want to challenge Porro with a doggy, but it does leave you open to, if Porro on a higher ownership does well, then he could make sure that your green arrow is grey/red by the end of the week. The same logic applies for Bowen versus Kudus, or Son versus Madison if you only wanted one or the other. So these are decisions that you want to figure out what type of FPL manager you want to be this week. And also just fundamentally, who do you actually think scores the most points? If you think that Wissa outscores Tony, then go for it. But I think most people would agree that it's more likely that Tony would outscore Wissa, and therefore you go for the player more likely to score more points. But yeah, there's plenty of other options you can go for. And I did have a quick look at an all-in free hit draft earlier. And that would basically just involve trying to predict the way that each specific game goes. There's only 4 to predict, so it wouldn't be that taxing to do so. And if you see, I don't know, the Spurs game, for instance, being a bit end-to-end, goals for both sides, but Spurs come out 3 or 4-1 winners, then maybe you bin off a Spurs defender, you go all in on their attack, triple up on their attack, and use that defensive slot elsewhere, maybe triple up on the Brentford defence if you think they will keep a clean sheet, and then really lean very heavily into specific results that you think are going to happen. Obviously, they can go wrong, and it's much more risky than a balanced free hit like this one, but it also has the most potential for high upside if you're chasing rank, because all it takes is those results to go your way and you've got no conflicts in your side. You just make sure that you don't have any attackers versus any of your defenders, for instance, and it could just as easily go really spectacularly wrong or explode and be one of the best decisions you've ever made. So I don't think it needs to be this 11. This is just the most sensible, balanced one I think most of us would agree on.
Yeah. We've obviously we're taking it from on one level and not free hitting, and it's easy to kind of say, all right, this is what I would do, but if it's not your team, it's kind of a very different sort of scenario. And maybe you would be more punty across the board. Maybe you would have Wissa over Tony. Maybe you would go for a Vaughan Gibbs-White or something over a Bailey if you were really kind of trying to make a difference. And maybe you would kind of go with new doggy, or try something else with the defender pick that you go with. But I think overall it's a really interesting scenario, this free hit. I don't know whether it's always been this way. I think last year I went quite aggressive with the free hit. The years before, I think the free hit was one where most people were that's a goal, but Palmer's been subbed. So...
Palmer is off, so I'm not bothered. I don't care.
Yeah. It's Murphy for Newcastle.
Fine.
Yeah. Oh no. So I think what's really interesting about this free hit is that I think both free hitters, non-free hitters are expecting it to not be the highest scoring week they've ever seen.
Yeah,
I think if you're free hitting, the kind of the calculus is this is a guaranteed green, and almost definitely Rob Jones said in the chat, my free hits activated as I'd only have 5 hits. Absolutely fine, 100% understand
then,
that.
yeah.
And if you're in that situation where a lot of people were, you went kind of the other way with your transfers and kind of how you kind of plan things. No worries, because I understand that. But the expectation has to be kind of a fairly low scorer. I think the kind of the FPL review optimal free hit team is kind of looking around kind of the 50s. And we, as non-free hitters, are kind of just hoping to maintain rank, as we spoke about earlier. And I think that's kind of really interesting, because I don't think there's quite been this opposition for quite a long time. I can't remember in the past if there has been a point where I've been quite aggressive with the free hit. I don't think there has been. I think last year was the first time I was really aggressive with it. I think the years before, I'd always been quite defensive with it, or at least kind of fallen in line with it when others had used a free hit. Okay, we had 2 free hits, didn't we, a couple of years ago as well. So yeah, I think that kind of it's almost like there's kind of a weird sense of kind of unity that yes, even though free hitters and non-free hitters alike on social media are arguing it out, I think there's definitely kind of an undercurrent of acceptance that it's kind of not the most exciting week to be free hitting almost. And I suppose when we were both sort of, I definitely was celebrating the fact that it was going to be the max chaos, i.e. the lowest kind of number of games available this game week. I had that high in mind, and it's I don't know, I think it's just fascinating that it's kind of come that way. I mean, yeah, you said earlier on that you've kind of done aggressive and defensive free hits, Sam. I mean, do you have any memories of how each have sort of gone? When were you aggressive?
Are you accusing me of being too defensive as a manager, Tom?
Exactly.
My aggressive seasons were quite a few years ago now. Generally, I think the last couple of years, especially, has been defensive free hits, because we've had a lot of bigger blanks, and obviously in 2020, all the way through to last season, there was at least one major event of some kind that meant that there were postponements all over the place, and I needed to use a free hit to plug a gap more often than not. So my more recent memories have been defensive moves just to optimize for a week and get out of a hole. Before that, before the world went upside down for a little bit there after 2020, I think that's when I was able to use a free hit in a much more aggressive manner. That was when I was starting to get used to FPL, I think 2015, 2016, around that sort of time, and using it when I saw a double game week crop up on the horizon. I was just, yeah, I'll throw the free hit at that, because I know I can get loads of doublers there. And it did go well, but my memories of them are just positive, because I remember them being green arrows and rising up my mini leagues. I wouldn't be able to tell you the specifics of whether that strategy was better for me across a season, or whether it would have been better used in a defensive manner later on in the season or at another point, because at those times, I think I was just using it as a reactionary move. Whereas now it's much more strategic, and I think that lends itself to a more defensive play because of the type of manager I am. Hence your giggle at the start there, and that would be correct. This season, though, I just have a feeling that playing it aggressively in 34 will have its upside, and I think, considering the defensive play here only cost me, would only be the difference of maybe a hit or two, and then maybe that fourth midfielder, that third defender. In my specific scenario, I feel like I can gain more than that by playing it aggressively. Although time will tell, and after game week 34 is out of the way, we'll know which one would have been the more prudent strategy. But I've been defensive for a couple of years now. I want to live a little, so let's go on the front foot.
Good. WGTA curse coming for you, coming for you. And I think the kind of the I mentioned earlier on, some people may be kind of sat there with 7 and wondering which way to go. Very quickly, I think kind of, if you're there and take -4, get to 9, if that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think 9's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think that's kind of something that you'd be worried about too much.
It's getting the right 9. That's the key.
Yeah,
like, if you cover off the most important high upside picks, I think you're fine.
Absolutely, it's quality over quantity.
Definitely.
That's always going to be the way that it was going to go. Cool. So in summary, how worried are we? Maybe it's kind of churlish to be saying this, but I mean, we have been planning for it for quite a while, and I'm not as worried. I've got the expectations are in place, like managing my own expectations. I'm not expecting Green Arrow. Absolute sort of stretch goal is a tiny green, I'd be happy with, you know, a 50k red, something like that. Because I'll be going into it with a hit as well, and I'll be 2 players down. I'm just obviously kind of, I believe, and again, vibes. Again, it's not going to be something which is picked up if you're an analytics devotee. And you may think I may think I'm an idiot, but I don't care. But I mean, I think that, you know, the worry level for me, because in terms of that quality versus quantity idea, the worry level for me is not particularly a high defcon. And my feeling is that, you know, I think that we can probably hopefully be kind of not too far off the safety score for the week ahead. I think that if we'd been kind of more poorly planned, which was not going to be very likely, especially with Sam's influence on this podcast, and I don't think, I think that I'd be more worried, but I think I'd be free hitting them in that situation anyway. So yes, I'm not particularly worried. I'm expecting the red arrow. If there is kind of massive punishment, it is going to come from some sort of mass variance event which occurs in an individual player that has been brought in because there's been some kind of, you know, content creator led stampede towards a particular individual. And maybe we've done that through promoting Leon Bailey. Who knows? So, you know, if Bailey does lots of points, then through gritted teeth, we're both going to be very happy, albeit wishing we had those points for
Unless
ourselves.
he's got like 50+% EO or something, that would be horrendous.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people are actually going to free hit in the end, because it's going to do all sorts of weird stuff to live FPL. We're going to note that for next year as well, like, because I think this is the first year that live FPL has been obviously permeating everybody's fours. Heo's permeates everybody's fours. And it's been so divisive when you use the free hit in the past. This year is kind of quite clear when you can use it, or when we know a lot of people are using it. And as we're on the other side of it, and we're interested to keep a note of. But yeah, back central point, Sam. How worried are you?
Not massively. I'm a little bit less optimistic than you are in terms of the green arrow. I think because on the
I'm not optimistic at all.
No, but sorry. So I'm less optimistic than that. So my point being that I am expecting a red, and I'd be very, very surprised if it was a green, based on the knowledge that even all of the picks that we're going to have will all be the high EO picks. So that there's basically going to be no net gain, or very little net gain, from any of the players we've got in our starting 9 or 10 players. Obviously we might get a marginal gain, like a 10-20% EO net gain off of any returns across the board, but generally speaking, that could be wiped out by any players we miss out on, and the fact we've got one less player, in my case at least, taking a hit. I think that'll be popular for any non-free hitters as well. So I think I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I'll probably lose 4 points on the crowd minimum just through taking the hits. And then I would be happy enough as long as I don't lose more than 10 points to the crowd overall. Because I'll get to 10 players and most of those big hitters are covered, I would also be a little bit surprised / annoyed if the loss was more than 10 points. So I'm expecting somewhere in the realms of a 4 to a 10 point loss. If it's better than that, then massive bonus. If it's worse than a 10 point loss, I would consider that problematic, and I'd start worrying that I can't make that up with the free hit at the later point. I'd still be hopeful that I could, but I think it becomes less and less likely that I would be able to, especially considering I took a hit last week as well. So yeah, a big part of that, actually, coming on to Rob's question, good timing on putting it on the screen as well, will be what happens with the FA Cup quarterfinals. I think because we're looking at free hitting potentially in game week 34/37, the FA Cup quarterfinals are going to be important for us. And I think the one that I keep coming back to is just making sure that Newcastle and Man United get dumped out. If they both get dumped out, then it's very likely that they get the double game week in game week 34. And that for me is enough for me to think, yeah, there's good upside there. There's at least 4 or 5 players in those across those two teams that I'd want to attack with good fixtures that week as well. And then if you sprinkle in a little bit of Everton or Crystal Palace or 1 or 2 other teams that might get the double there as well, I think you can build a good free hit team with a lot of potential for upside there. I think if you take Newcastle and Man United out, then it becomes a little bit more plain, and I start worrying that maybe the upside's not there quite as much. Although it is worth noting, if either of those teams crash out, if either of those teams go through in the FA Cup, it's because Liverpool or Man City are out, which obviously moves around some other fixtures as well. So we'll get different doubles than the ones we're expecting at different times. So lots of moving pieces, but I think to answer Rob's question, getting Man United and Newcastle out of the FA Cup and therefore into game week 34, very likely at least, would be helpful for our strategy.
Yep, fair play. All right, very short. The next bit, which is if you're non-free hitting this week, I think Chris kind of just talk about transfers in for this. I do think that defense-wise, it's an interesting question regarding would you even, if you don't own Porro, I'd probably kind of wager that even Doughty, I wouldn't really be rushing to make that move. I kind of wonder whether you just kind of leave the defenders, really. I mean,
especially for a hit.
Yeah, it's just not worth it, is it?
Yeah, free transfer, I get it. For a hit, I don't think any of them are expecting over 4 points. A few of them will get over 4 points, but figuring out confidently which ones those are going to be, I think you're more likely to net lose on a 4-point hit in defense and in goal as well, if for whatever reason you don't have a keeper.
Yeah, and hook Sam up with your sexy spreadsheet. If you are in a situation where you're literally buying a defender on a free transfer and that's it, you're done. Like,
yeah,
you're obscenely good planning. And midfielder wise, I mean, I thought everybody owned Son, but it only kind of came in through the hall, and that occurred this week. That doesn't appear to be a thing. But unsurprisingly, almost 200,000 transfers in already for him. I feel like he probably is the most. I share James and Planet FPL's sort of dislike the word essential, but I feel like he's probably going to be kind of the one. I don't think we need to kind of wax lyrical about that. And I think we're both looking at by Madison, Sam, for Fulham, and then if you're not free hitting, obviously the Luton game is next. It kind of feels like you're kind of going for that, aren't you? Really, Bowen's got Newcastle in 30, which is kind of a fine matchup really these days, given how Newcastle's have been labouring a lot at the back. But I don't know. I kind of think that's kind of, if you can do it, if you're not massively invested in Saka, so you haven't had him at the start of the season, or you've got another way of getting to Maddison, I think that's absolutely fine to do. Even if it's selling Foden, I think that's absolutely fine. Because I can imagine you've got less in Foden than you would do in Saka. I feel like Maddison's kind of the one that we're both really interested in going for, and I think that by the time you listen to this pod, if you're listening back, I probably would have Maddison in my team. I can't really, if you're not free hitting, kind of see where else you're really going to be going, especially because I don't know. Because I suppose in our situation, you're looking to wild card pretty soon, but the 29 of Fulham away and the 30 of Luton at home is pretty irresistible, really, for Spurs, isn't it?
Yeah, I think having that second Spurs mid gives you a little bit of upside in that fixture as well. So for me, Maddison makes the most sense. Postecoglou as well has been saying that they're trying to get him into more advanced positions and get him more shots on goal too. So I think there's a lot of boxes ticked by Maddison, and the move just makes a lot of sense. You could look at other upside picks at Spurs, Kulusevski or Brennan Johnson, if you back them to start. It is a bit of a lottery, but Johnson in particular has been looking pretty decent recently. So again, if you wanted to go differential, that's fine. Nottingham Forest midfielders, maybe, but again, I think because of Spurs fixture in game week 30, you're more likely to want to carry them an extra week, and therefore it just makes those the better holds, and just the fact that they are playing in the better team, creating more chances, and are fundamentally better players as well. So yeah, in summary, it just makes a lot of sense.
Certainly. In the striker slot, we both mentioned Tony. Kieran earlier on mentioned Wissa. Many making the straight swap from Solanke. It seems out there.
Yeah.
I do think, yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's probably, there's no point in kind of going over too far over it. I think that kind of getting Tony is going to be what people are looking to do. I think he's kind of in the top 5 for transfers in right now. Solanke, second most transferred out striker as well earlier on. Only question potentially is there any sense in skipping that and going for a midfielder or going for a defender transfer? Just because one, yes, all right, Tony had I think cut 2 key passes on SofaScore. Obviously the really good attempts. The Ramsdale tipped over. But Solanke's got really good fixtures, 30 to 32, potential double in 34. If you've had him for a while, you and I have not had him for particularly long, would there be maybe an argument to not go with removing Solanke especially if you're kind of running through all the way potentially to 35 and thinking, oh, you know what, I'm going to just kind of wildcard a bit later and then make sure I optimize 37, because he's got very good fixtures and I suspect he's going to be very popular from 30 onwards. And I suspect that on both our wildcards in 31, he may well, Nick Jackson could well find his way in if there's the 34, etc., etc. But could there be an argument, Sam, to leave Solanke and ignore the Brentford strikers because they've not exactly been setting the world on fire?
Yeah, there's certainly an argument for it. If you are looking to run through a little bit longer, like you said, the Bournemouth fixtures are looking good, and Solanke has been more impressive and has all the same factors that Tony has, with penalties covered as well. So the data's looking good for Solanke. He's in great form, generally speaking, other than the penalty miss and anyway. So yeah, it does make sense. What I would ask is, how long are you planning on playing it through? Because at the moment, I won't go into the minutiae of this because honestly, it hurts my head even thinking about it.
It's your head. I mean, my head's like, whenever you go into this kind of, but in game week, blah, 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 blah could play, and blah, blah could play. But also, if this happens in the cup, blah, blah could then play. I can't lose track. I start daydreaming.
here's a very long domino effect that's summarized very poorly by me. If you want a much better summary, go to Ben Crellin or James at Planet FPL. But basically, Brighton losing 4-0 to Roma in Europe has made it quite unlikely now that Bournemouth get the double in game week 34. To put it very, very simply, or much less likely. I can't remember exactly why. Someone will explain it, and I will research that, so I'll have it better prepared for next pod. But because Brighton are very unlikely to progress in Europe, I think it means that Bournemouth's double in game week 34 is now less likely. So if you're running through with Solanke, that's fine, but it's probably just a fixtures play rather than a double game week play in game week 34.
Cool. All right. Lovely.
Don't ask me any follow-ups on that.
I will not, because I started daydreaming already. Right. Captaincy. I think that if anybody wasn't going to be captaining Son,
they probably are now.
Ability to show up, post 90. I think it was on like 7 before with the I think it was maybe on 6 actually, wasn't it, with the assist, and then off he goes. I think it's got to be some, right? But maybe there is some interest elsewhere. So best fixture on paper, I guess, is anyone playing Burnley? So maybe Tony. But really, as we've both touched on, not really in form, whatever that means. So maybe if you're a non-free hitter, there could be a tactical reason to take on what's likely to be the chalk captain in Son. But it's quite a difficult one to really pass, isn't it?
Yeah, so whilst there is a tactical reason to try and take it on, I think he just is the clear favourite captain at this point. And taking it on for me would only ever be an option if I felt that there was another option that is very, very close behind him, and I felt that the upside was worth chasing there. There are other good options, but I think Son is just, there are too many factors in his favour at the moment, and Watkins might not be the worst idea. Obviously, Tony against Burnley, again, not bad, but I keep coming back to Son, and all of the benefits or all of the advantages those options have, Son has, plus a couple of others. So yeah, for me, it is definitely going to be on Son. I do understand the logic of trying, if you're on a non-free hit strategy, to differentiate yourself and pick a different captain in the hope of going against the crowd and therefore getting the big haul and getting the green arrow. But I would say that also, whilst the upside's there, you also leave yourself open to an even bigger red arrow if you're going against the objectively best captain option this game week, and you're not on the free hit. So you're probably taking a hit. You're probably a player or two down. It could be an absolute disaster. Obviously, it could be a great trick shot as well, and there's upside there. So it depends what kind of FPL manager you are. I am not that type of FPL manager, though. And I think unless it was a proper 50-50 call, which I just don't think it is this week, I wouldn't be going elsewhere.
I am that kind of FPL manager, but I think that what you're saying is hugely compelling and fairly obvious as well. Not condemning you to being an obvious person, but I think it's really straightforward, isn't it? And I think that you don't want the upside versus the downside. That calculus is fairly clear, isn't it? Really. It's worth noting that Bournemouth and Fulham, in terms of XGA, are only 2 apart. So it's not like Burnley are clearly the worst kind of option on the table. In fact, the 2 worst options on the table are West Ham, who are third from bottom in terms of XGA this season. So bearing in mind the point about Watkins away, and also Luton. But I don't think you're going to be really sat there unless you're really, 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 really high on the risk appetite stuff, and you really fancy Chris Wood or really fancy a Langer or something like that. I don't think a Langer actually started the last game, so that'd be really kind of spicy. Could be some sort of argument for Watkins there, based on West Ham and his current recent away form. But I think there probably it will be Son for me. I always like taking the anxiety out of the captain, and especially if you're looking to just get as many points as you can in this scenario. I think that probably is the best way to go. Right, our teams to end then, just so we can parade where we've gone with this. It's me, isn't it?
Yeah, it's your first up. Yeah.
So I'm going to have 9 this week. As mentioned, I've got 9 of kind of the key men that we're all going to most people are going to have if you are kind of in the kind of vaguely engaged sphere. Which, if you listen to WGTA this far, I'm going to assume you are. Leno in goal. I'm happy with that. He's going to concede lots of stupid goals, but I'm hoping he'll save lots of shots as well. Doughty and Porro, no third defender. So 2 defender sort of setup. Bowen, Madsen, Son, some of the armbands. Again, 3 midfield setup, and then Morris, probably Tony, and Watkins up front. So the classic 2-3-3 formation for me, but I'm fairly confident that those are the 9 which are going to be infused with quality. We'll need to see what happens, of course, the week. I might get Madison tonight. Saka obviously could well drop, is playing in against Porto. See what happens there. I'll leave the other transfer just in case there is some sort of random injury. I know Bowen is playing on Thursday, I believe. They're playing on Sunday, aren't they? Aston Villa and West Ham. So Bowen's playing on Sunday. Outside of that, if there is a blah blah pulled up in training, he's injured, and won't be featuring this week, then there may be some consideration for a late free hit if something does happen. We should have said that earlier, really, but I mean, that's obviously going to be a massive sort of really unlucky factor if one of us is forced to pull our free hit, because I'm fairly set on that. Fairly set on that 9. I think that's absolutely fine. And I'm my concern levels are even moderate, put it that way. And you've got 10 men, well, 9.5 if we include Charlie Taylor as the half.
How very dare you? This guy is quality. No, yeah, Charlie Taylor is the only difference between my team and yours. I think we're both for a hit as well. So I will have 10, but I'm only expecting appearance points there, really. If I get anything from Charlie Taylor, I will be ecstatic. All the rest,
assisting coming, assisting.
if it happens, I
assist
will
bonus,
consider my
subs in the 60th minutes. He goes off clutching his hamstring. That would be ideal.
Oh,
classic Sam as well.
That actually would be classic Sam. How dare you? That would be absolutely amazing. I'm not holding up high hopes there, but like with your team as well, cover off, I think, all of the major bases. Armband on Son. Very happy with going in with 10 for a -4. I think that's fine. Just crossing my fingers that nothing happens midweek. So yeah, I think I'm unlikely to free hit at this point unless 2 or 3 players go down injured. Otherwise, I'll probably just, through gritted teeth, just bear it and get out the other side into wildcard 30 or 31. One mentioned just in the chat as well, Michael Scott. Maybe the Michael Scott, we don't know. But if so, hope Dunder Mifflin is treating you well. In the meantime, though, he's asking about Muniz as a decent option ahead of Morris. I presume on the free hit, in which case I do actually quite like that. I think Spurs are open at the back and Muniz has looked fantastic for Fulham recently. So if you fancy that as a differential option, can't really fault it. Just wanted to get that question answered because Muniz is a player that is interesting to me and he's at a great price point as well.
Yep, big hero for me in draft.
yeah, great shout.
Could well end up being in our wildcard teams. You never know. They don't double, do they? This year,
Fulham, no. There is a very there is a chance that they blank in game week 34.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
and if that happens, then they'll obviously double later on, I think.
Well, if that does happen, then shoe in. All right, perfect. Well, I mean, let's hope it's not like last week. And we can. I completely changed tack. You were kind of already there, and let's hope it's not a massive injury or something like that. But I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And hopefully you have enjoyed the show, whether or not you're on a free hit in game week 29. We do wish you all the best either way. Although if you're not on a free hit, probably slightly more of the best from us, considering that is our strategy as well. In the meantime, though, we have been Who Got the Assist. Thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully you did enjoy the show regardless. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL. I'm on there at FPL Pricey, and on Instagram and Threads, it's WGTA.FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could follow us on those socials, give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to it. Or, of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, either live or afterwards, a like and subscribing to the channel would be greatly appreciated.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. We hope you enjoyed the pod. Hope it's just you think about your approach for next week and beyond. Although you've almost definitely made those conclusions already. I don't know why I wrote that in my running order. We're back next Sunday at the end of the blank game week, just to discuss everything and send you off international break. Maybe back in national break halfway through to do something kind of longer, some more macro. But hey, there we go. Have a lovely week. Hopefully Solanke does something. Actually, no, I don't care about that. I hope I miss another penalty. But I hope that Morris and I hope that Doughty do loads of points midweek. And bad luck to everybody who's triple captain Solanke, basically. All right, see you soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?